Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera. Anda sedang menonton Buletin AWANI bersama saya Marlina Manaf. Forum Ekonomi Sedunia untuk ASEAN bermula di ibu kota Vietnam, Hanoi. Kamarul, Bahrin, Haron, Timbalan Ketua Pengarang Astro AWANI ada butirannya dari Hanoi. Kita bersama dengan Kamarul Bahrin, silakan.
Purata warga ASEAN berada di usia yang begitu remaja dan muda. Ini adalah sebab kenapa Forum Ekonomi Sedunia meletakkan unjuran bahawa menjelang 2050, rantau ASEAN akan menjadi ekonomi keempat terkuat di dunia. Namun ini tidak akan berjaya dan itulah yang disebutkan pada sesi pertama untuk Forum Ekonomi Sedunia WEF peringkat ASEAN yang berlangsung tahun ini di Hanoi pada ketika ini. Yang termasuk di dalam sesi pertama itu adalah YB Syed Saddiq membincangkan tentang ASEAN 4.0 untuk semua. Open forumnya is about ASEAN 4.0 for all, dan beliau membawa suara sebagai pemimpin, bukan sahaja pemimpin paling muda Menteri Kabinet di Malaysia, tetapi pemimpin muda rantau Asia Tenggara, ASEAN, bercakap pada dunia bahawa rantau ini juga mampu bangkit jika kita tidak hanya melihat kepada 4IR sebagai negatif, menghilangkan pekerjaan, tetapi kita bangkit untuk menguasai teknologi ini dan merealisasikan potensi kepelbagaian, pluralisme yang ada pada masyarakat dan juga rantau kita. Saksikan kehebatan forum terbuka YB Syed Saddiq di WEF ASEAN Hanoi.
And how many of those people really be successful, right? You're not hearing someone saying that, hey, this guy is the second Google of the world. So in a way, if you think about innovation and you think about kind of like, you're trying to do, I think the most important thing, yes, we would love to learn from Google. We love to learn from Silicon Valley. But you're not going to be successful learning from Google and saying that I'm going to build a second Google. In a way, many of the government trying to say, I'm going to build a Silicon Valley of Malaysia, of kind of like, China, or Vietnam. I'm sorry. That's the truth. Yes, maybe that in an analogy way, that kind of like, how you're going to explain it for people to understand. But it affects how we think about, how to make innovation happen in our context. So what we thinking, right now as we speak, we think, even I come to Silicon Valley and talk to the Vietnamese communities there, I think that I should go here and open an office. Not the other way around, not asking those people to move back, because I said to them, you know what? You're living in one of the best places in the world. Who am I to ask you to move back? And who am I to ask you to move back because you love your country? Okay, thank you, but you have your life to worry about, right? I'm very practical. So in a way, thinking about innovation is, again, my point being is how to make that happen within a context, right? And then right now the word, in a way, I think the whole world is Silicon Valley. Innovation happen in any way, in any form. You don't need to try to confine it within a geographic location, right? So the trick is to think about what problem you want to solve and how to mobilize resources from wherever possible to solve that problem.
You combine two very interesting elements. You always talk about being practical, but at the same time you talk about magic. I think that's a wonderful combination, being practical and yet having magic in your operation. Yasmin, you want to say something, but before we go to you, can I just put one piece of information towards you? We also put a poll on Twitter. We asked people, a lot of people have concerns that with the fourth industrial revolution, a lot of jobs will be lost. So we put a poll up on Twitter. Do you think technology will create jobs or destroy jobs overall? We got about 3,000 replies within a space of a few hours, and a majority, 58%, felt the fourth industrial revolution would lead to the creation of jobs, 58%, and 42% said they would destroy jobs. So I just want to put that information out there. And Yasmin, yes, turning to you, what would you like to add?
I just wanted to add on a little bit more to what Ming was saying, and this is about the magic of Silicon Valley. It is true that Silicon Valley is what I call the mothership of innovation, but we would be cautioned to emulate Silicon Valley as is. Because if you think about it, two facts that I always put forth. Number one is Silicon Valley hasn't been replicated in its totality anywhere in the world, not even in the US. So everybody has their own version. So we should look into what is organically the strength of a country and to build innovation ecosystem based on those strengths and not, because if you say that we want to be the Silicon Valley of so-and-so, then I think it's almost saying that we're setting ourselves up for failure because Silicon Valley has not been replicated anywhere in the world. So that's number one. Number two is the question as to whether is the Silicon Valley footprint the best? And I think it's only half of the story because I was on a panel at The Economist a year ago and there was this argument, there was this question, is Asia going to win or is the US going to win in the race for innovation? And I put up and say Asia is going to win because if Asia is if winning means as a national win, then inclusivity has to be the key driver. And America is not inclusive at all. Silicon Valley has got these companies, they are $1 trillion in market cap, but if you go into Midland, if you go into the heartland of the US, you hardly see any adoption. You will still see entrepreneurs who have not embraced in totality. You'll see banks who are still very archaic. They're still very credit card driven as opposed to, e-wallet driven. So I think we need to be wary of the fact that Silicon Valley is only one component of it, but inclusivity is something that governments have to really focus on.
Okay, so be inspired by Silicon, but don't copy it, is the message I'm hearing. Okay, I want to ask you, I told you about this Twitter poll. The majority thinks the fourth industrial revolution would lead to the overall, more people felt it would create jobs. What do you here in this room think? Raise your hands, the people who think that the fourth industrial revolution will create jobs. How many people think it will create jobs? And you have to raise your hands high because otherwise we can't see them because all of you are wearing white shirts. Okay, wow, okay, so the whole panel thinks it will create jobs. And how many think it will lead to a loss of jobs?
It will also lose.
It will too. It will too. Okay, both. Now that is very interesting. Okay, Sadiq, since you are our youngest panel member here, I want to ask you, obviously you're very keen that the young people will profit from this digital economy, but every time there's big change, people get left behind.
Yeah.
Now, you as a youth minister, how do you feel? What would you do to engage that people don't get left behind in what is described as a digital divide sometimes?
Firstly, the reason why I believe young people benefit the most because the majority of disruptors are indeed young people. So while there are job losses, it's expected in next 2 decades about 50% of the jobs today can be automated or replaced with AI. That's a huge number. But the same concern was also there during the first or the third industrial revolution. But the job creation after is a lot more and a lot more tech-specific and high-skilled. The concern which I have is access to education in the next 20 years. Why do I say this? With the fourth industrial revolution, you'll see the specifications or the specialization needed in order for you to get that job will increase. Because repetitive jobs can easily be automated and can be replaced. Ones which cannot are ones which require high critical thinking, creative thinking, and also greater specialty like in nanotechnology and the rest, which means that the time taken to educate that person will also increase. And if you look, since the 1800s, back then you don't need a very coordinated studying module. The time taken to study is also a lot less. As time passes by, it takes 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, now even 4 to 5 years in universities. And imagine with greater specializations, that time will also increase, therefore the cost barrier will increase as well. However, while I say that, the unique part about the fourth industrial revolution, we cannot imagine what the world will look like in the next 20 years. I'm very sure when spinning jenny was introduced and replaced the cotton industry, a lot of people didn't know that in the end, a lot more jobs will be created, because from there onward, there's a trickle down to greater communities, access to those jobs increase as well, greater technology, and the rest. So similarly, when I talk about education, so while you may seem, well, the time taken for education will increase, therefore the cost will increase as well. But when you see education being digitized as well, the cost of education becomes cheaper when it is digitized. You have digital universities, you have free courses you can take up online. And now a lot of unnecessary skill sets are being phased out, therefore you are only taught what is needed to you. So in a way, I believe, almost everyone I talk to have that concern, especially in Malaysia, because again, when young people, we were a very young country, when young people enter the job market, they haven't specialized yet, then their skill sets can easily be replaced. But while that is true, I think the next 20 years with VR, genetic editing, a lot of technologies in which we could never ever expect to take place in this era, there will be that development and the expansion will increase. And I believe, naturally, the inclusivity will also come with it as well, especially with a more equitable government, a government which cares and takes great interest in protecting the needs of young people. The reason, in the Malaysian context, why I'm very optimistic is because, firstly, we're a very young population. At the same time, the youth population is very big, and especially if you reduce the voting age, it will become bigger. So in the end, when the youth becomes the future, governments, corporate entities must cater to their demands in order for the nation to progress. So while there are concerns, and these concerns are indeed legitimate, I think the benefits in which we will gain will be much larger, because not only are the benefits which we can see today, but the unimaginable benefits which will come in the next 20 years. Similarly, what we could not have foreseen when spinning Jenny was introduced, when the computer and internet was introduced, I think there will be a greater benefit which we have not seen today, but will see in the future.
See, Malaysia is a good example because you are the youth minister and then you have a prime minister, Mahathir Mohamad, who's the oldest leader in the world. So you have both ends of the spectrum there, where I think, and what I would also suggest to all our young student friends here, you're all very, of course, savvy and clever with technology, but do also discuss and help your mothers and your fathers and your grandmothers and your grandfathers so they also stay in touch with technology. My mother is 85. And she's completely, with iPhone and iMessages and WhatsApp and everything, she does all that. I'm learning from her more than she's learning from me. So I think you must make sure that your generation of your parents and your grandparents don't get left behind as we make progress in digital technology. Now, okay, time for one of you to ask a question. A question back there, a gentleman in a white shirt.
There's a lot of people. Waiting.
Hello, everybody. My last name is Paich. I have a comment and I have a question. The comment is, you actually don't want Google to come here. It means they've cornered the market. And the question is for the government officials. The EU had just passed a very important law, a regulation called the General Data Protection Regulation, which protects us from Google and Facebook. So, the government officials, what are you doing to protect your populations against the seeping intrusiveness of Google into your population's lives? Thank you.
Too specific.
For the government, you are the one.
I have a contrarian viewpoint. Trust me, I'm not being paid by Google. So I believe data should be as open, transparent, and accessible as possible. Not only because data sharing or the transparency of data alone will allow for small companies to then climb up a lot faster in comparison to having monopolies or oligopolies, but at the same time, in the world which we are living today, the interconnectedness of the world adds a great value to all of us. It allows for specific advertisement, which then benefits a specific community. It allows for people or for corporations to target or to cater to the demands of specific communities, not on random, but what those communities demand for. But most importantly, what I care about is to allow for small countries or to climb up or to catch up with the European giants. I believe that since, I follow quite closely the additional regulations placed in European countries based on data protection, I believe that will be one of the stumbling blocks in Europe, especially when you see Chinese companies in China which has open data, or at least among their own respective communities, then being able to tap a huge market and a bigger market, if not in Europe, then in ASEAN, in other parts of the world, and their companies having a greater advantage and leverage over European giants. But I'm not just looking at China. I believe then they will face their own problems as well. But then we will look back at countries like Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, in which these concerns are not the greatest of concerns, which then gives greater room for these respective startups and companies to expand. Data protection is important, but overzealous regulation in the long run will hurt the development, especially of small, medium enterprises and tech startups, which are already placed at a great disadvantage because they don't have the capital like the more bigger industries. But I believe that in the end, having greater access to data and at the same time data transparency and sharing of that data allows for small, medium enterprises and for developing countries to tap into a market which they've never had the opportunity to tap into before. Thank you.
But at the same time, I agree, all right, with Sadiq, but I think that's the reason why we have an open forum. I think ASEAN is nicely sitting at an opportunity here. I think amongst all the 10 countries, if we could come together and discuss how do we set in place data governance so that people could trust the data that we are sharing across the 10 countries, then I think we at least have a great pilot, and we could say that data can be shared, but shared within certain guidelines and protecting the individual, the companies. So we don't want to stunt the growth, but I think we have the capacity to come together. And that's why I was very excited because 3 months ago in SMU, we started the Data Governance Center, which was funded by the Economic Development Board and the private sector. So I think today's world, we need public-private partnership, not in just fixed assets or infrastructure, but in digital assets and digital structure. I think we have a chance as a region.
Rajan, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, no,
to
I
this?
think a couple of thoughts just building on this. I think when it comes to privacy, consumer privacy is incredibly important, right? And I think the most important thing for a consumer is to have control of his or her own data. Right? You should be able to control what data is captured, how that data is used, and the minute you want to delete all data that a platform has, whether it's Google or other platforms, you should have that ability to do, right? And where we are today is actually we've created that ability. So if you can go to Google, I'm just speaking specifically about Google because the comment was on Google. You can go to Google My Settings, and actually we share with you as a user all the data that we have about you. And you can decide to completely delete the data. You can decide to take that data, port it to a different platform, and so on and so forth, right? So I think from a privacy standpoint, this idea that as a user, you control your data is paramount, right? And then we need to obviously be custodians of that data and give you the choice that you need, that whenever you can do that. So I think that's the first point. I think the second one, just to build on what the minister was saying, look, ASEAN's power is in ASEAN, right? It's 10 countries, it's several $1 trillion of a GDP. And if we unlock the digital economy of ASEAN, it can create $1 trillion of incremental value, right? Simple way that all of you should think about it is, that is pretty much your future. If you unlock the digital economy in ASEAN, but to be able to do that, it's very important, I think, to the point that was also made, is that we have free flow of information with the right set of governance models, integrated payment systems, again, which goes back to information, and really a harmonized set of regulations across these countries, right? Because if every country decides to kind of lock down, you pretty much have a whole set of small countries that have locked down. So by definition, not only are you going to impact small businesses and impact their growth and make it harder to start companies, but also the addressable market. See, ideally, a Vietnamese startup or a Vietnamese company should instantly wake up in the morning and say, my addressable market is 660 million people, and it's $2.5 to $3 trillion. Right? When you do that, all of a sudden, you're pretty much operating at massive scale from day zero. So I think we need to be very, very thoughtful about this topic, because sometimes, we forget what's the real objective. The objective is to give you, as a consumer, control of your data.
Amrita, if I can just add in quick one to say that, everybody has said it. I want to echo the fact that for ASEAN, this whole concept of data is the new oil, and how then do we get the greatest value out of this new commodity that doesn't get depleted, that doesn't get depleted, right? I mean, data is the only commodity that gets better with time and with as it grows. But right now, the opportunity for ASEAN is really about to leapfrog and understand the optimization, and I think what Wabi Minister has mentioned. How do we optimize this data value at the same time being able to, balance it with the whole data governance? Now, the caution or the worry that I have is that data governance, I know that within the ASEAN, is one of the 5 tracks in WEF ASEAN. But however, a lot of it is driven from ITU. And in ITU, I don't believe there is a track on ASEAN. So it's very much driven by the developed countries, where I think, like the Minister says, I think going a little bit overboard when it comes to data governance. So I think we need to find our own flavor, ASEAN, otherwise it will be a lost opportunity.
Okay, now we have just about 5 minutes left in this session. So we also actually put out this session and asked people questions on Facebook, and I have a few questions. We'll take one last question from the audience, and maybe that gentleman right at the back, in a white shirt right at the back, if you take the microphone to him. And while the microphone is going, I'm just going to read out a few questions that people asked. Ethan Wang said, my concern is how do we compete globally? Kate Sukum said, as the US economy is entering a late cycle of growth expansion, would the possible recession greatly affect ASEAN? What are the pros and cons of growing presence of China in ASEAN countries? Amelia Kings, and ethical considerations should not be neglected, as I mentioned. Srey Prana, my question to ASEAN leaders, how do CLM countries enhance economic growth? And Radan Sang, with increased importance of blockchain technology, we didn't talk about it at all, in the supply chain, taking into account the technology advancement gaps across member states, what are the strategic plans to ensure that the technology will benefit ASEAN international trades and enhancing mobility? Okay, so those were the internet questions that I'm sorry we were not able to answer, but some of the questions were answered in what we said. We'll take a last question from the gentleman at the back, and then we'll have final comments from the panel.
I have a question for you. That I know that when we join ASEAN group, I think that there are many countries combine, and that means that there are no boundary between country. And I think that there is many big company will join in Vietnam. So do you think that it's an advantage or disadvantage with the small business in Vietnam?
I think many of the panelists will agree that ASEAN collectively is stronger than as individual nations, but I'll let, in fact, Min answer that. But since there's a gentleman right next to you who also wants to ask, we'll take your question as well, and we'll get collectively Min to answer them. Please ask your question. The gentleman in the blue shirt? Yeah.
Vâng, chúng tôi có thêm một câu hỏi này dành cho 3 vị diễn giả đấy luôn ạ. Thứ nhất là xin được hỏi ông Rajan Anadan. Có thể nói rằng là như ông có nói ban đầu đấy ạ, Việt Nam thì là một dân số trẻ rất là tốt.
Have a very good young people, and 50% of Southeast Asia create 50% of the GDP of the Southeast Asia, and Google is a very strong companies on AI and IR for IA. So now, what Google is pay the attention to in ASEAN and in Vietnam in particular, do you have any mechanism to support the companies in ASEAN and in Vietnam? Second questions go to the Minister of Asia. You are supporting the government. So what are the support that Malaysian government pay for the SME and startup to follow the IR4IR? And the last question for Mr. Minh. You are the very successful startup. We have a very difficult for the startup, which is the capital. Do you have any advice for the startup to raise the fund and to collect, to call for the capital? Thank you. bây giờ
One question, we've now got 4 questions. If you don't mind, Minister, do you mind if we just take 5 minutes over the session? If it's fine with the Minister, sorry about that. But these are important questions, and I think we'll start with you, Min. If you can answer the last question the young man asked, as well as the earlier question that we heard.
Okay. Yeah, I got to ask this question a lot. You know, how to raise money, and you know, specifically, and in a way, it's a simple and difficult question to answer because, you know, you ask specifically and not generally, right? Because people are going to often say that, you know, you're going to go to CVC, you're going to raise money from friends and families, and so on and so forth. I think generally, from my own experience raising money, and then my own experience of seeing other people raising money, my answer may disappoint you. I think the best way of raising money is not to raise, but wait for people to give you money.
Yes.
Right?
Okay.
So basically, when you are so good that people like myself or Rajan say, please take my money, please. That is how you raise money.
Agree.
Of course, I mean, like, you know, if you are not, I mean, and I'm sure that in this World Economic Forum, there's many people, many startups that you may got to see later that they experience the same thing. So how to do that? And there will not be any specific answer to the word how, right? Because it's really depend on you. But basically, the point being is, I just make it simple. Don't go ask for money, right? Do something that people want to give you money. That's how you're going to get it. If you go ask for money, it can be painful, and it's not going to work out. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Rajan, there was a question for you for Google.
Yeah, no, look, we're doing a lot to try to support startups, right? And it ranges all the way from skilling, right? So we've got huge focus programs around helping, whether it's mobile developers, skills in AI, ML, and so on. So that's at one end of the spectrum, which is skilling. Second, we have a whole set of programs around cloud, around digital advertising, and so on and so forth, where we actually specifically focus and support startups. And third, we have a program called Launchpad Accelerator. It's those of you that are building startups, and if you're interested in leveraging the best of Google, it's for early stage companies where we have a 6-month intensive period of mentoring with startups. We don't do it for a large number, we do it for a very small number of startups where we bring the best of Google engineering, product, sales, marketing, so on and so forth. And then it culminates with spending some time at our corporate head office in Mountain View. So it's really a range of things that we do, all the way from skilling developers to actually working with early stage companies. And then across ASEAN, we've also started investing in companies. So some of you may be familiar. We actually made an investment in a company called Gojek and several others. So it's really a range of things that we do to support startups. I open with this. We are incredibly excited about the entrepreneurial energy and the entrepreneurial passion in Vietnam.
Okay, and Minister Sadiq, there's a question for you as well on Malaysia.
Yeah. I personally believe it's not a great idea to micromanage the success and failures of startups. I'm a bigger fan of ensuring that we prepare a fertile ground for young people to then be well educated so that then they can have their own startups, because startups are independent, right? So I want to talk a lot more about creating that fertile ground. One is, I think, from the lowest of spectrums, is just to ensure that internet is accessible to as many people as possible. So while we have the great city of Kuala Lumpur, there are also areas in Malaysia in which internet access, especially 4G, is not the greatest. Or some areas where it is, at least there's a big cost barrier. So one thing the government is focusing on, the Minister of Communication, YB Gobind Singh, is to ensure that internet becomes more affordable and accessible. And one plan which we put forward in the next 2 years is to ensure that the cost of internet is slashed by 50% and internet speed is doubled. And that's one of the biggest KPIs which I believe he is looking into. That's one part. Because then when you do that, entrepreneurs will come out on their own. Interest from the internet will then develop your own independent startup communities. Secondly is through education. That's why now we are ensuring that coding is made a subject in schools so that it can be taught to students as young as 8, 9, 10-year-old. We have a lot of coding competitions run by the government and also by private sector to ensure that the interest in coding is also expanded. Furthermore, I also believe in using unconventional ways to achieve a conventional outcome, because to me that's all about young people. Wherever I travel, almost all the successful entrepreneurs who I've met, especially in the tech industry, usually start up their interest in playing video games. I mean, this is just one more which I just heard. I met up with the founder and CEO of Razer, and he said the exact same thing. Yeah, Ming Liang, he started out by becoming a gamer. Look at some of the best, multi-billionaires, they all started with their interest partially due to that. So that's why I'm very keen, because it's not just about the youth ministry, it's also about the sports ministry, which is under my portfolio, which is to make esports very big. I'm very keen on that. I mean, I'm competing with Singapore, with Vietnam. I know Min will definitely try to capture the market. But in Malaysia, for example, half of our population are made up of gamers. I mean, I just met up my bodyguard, and he's like about 40 to 50. And when he's free, I see him playing Mobile Legends. His children play Dota. At the same time, Malaysia, while only a population of 32 to 33 million, but in terms of gaming revenue, it's ranked 21st, much larger than some of the biggest economies. But why I'm interested in that, it's not about the gaming part, less about that, of the industry and the ancillary benefits in which it will create. The interest and passion in not just becoming a gamer, but becoming a software developer, an IT developer. The passion and love into one's mobile phones or specifically IT. I mean, I think if we are able to create that fertile ground and territory, which acts as a helicopter pad or a launch pad for more startups, I think in the end, the government doesn't need to micromanage. In the end, we will have successful entrepreneurs like Min coming up, even without great government assistance, just by inspiring them and preparing the right ground, will move them forward. For more detailed explanation, we have the amazing MDEC director here, Dr. Yasmin, who's definitely leading that charge, so let's give some time for her to explain.
Dear audience, the challenge is that we are fighting against time at the moment. So I'm just going to ask Yasmin to, in 30 seconds, to give a final comment. And then I want Annie to end with the first I, identity, because we had one question about ASEAN as a whole and sovereign nations. So 30 seconds for you and 30 seconds for you, Annie.
It's amazing how the young minister learns to delegate so fast. But okay, just to wrap up, I guess, yeah. Sure. So for sure, this 4IR is real, is coming, and either which end of the stick do we end at? Are we going to be disrupted? Are we going to be disruptees? So the role that the government, and I do agree that it's not, I think Min, you mentioned it, or Annie, you mentioned it, it has to be a public-private. Government cannot micromanage. Government cannot be too prescriptive about what needs to be done. Innovation is also about, about creativity, right? So a few things that we need to do, like in Malaysia, YB minister mentioned, the minister mentioned the fact that infrastructure and a lot of ASEAN countries need to leapfrog in this. Malaysia has, apart from our minister has mentioned there's double the speed at half the price, but as well has gone to say that access to internet is a basic human right, and that that he is actually pushing for this to be put into the constitution. Right, so I think that's number one. The second part is that skills, skills. Investing in our young. This is so crucial, and this is something that the government, education, is not about textbook, it's not about telling them exam-based, it's about curiosity, it's about projects, it's about problem-solving skills. And the last one is about, to the young people, you are at such an interesting journey. I wish I'm young all over again. I wish, I was right where you are, coming out of university with the world ahead of you. If ASEAN or if Vietnam is going to leapfrog in this is going to be driven by you. If you do not do it, then the rest of the people who are already in the workforce, chances are they will be disrupted. So you will have to leapfrog. And how do you do it? You got to be a society of dreamers. And I'll always say this, dream the big dreams to solve the impossible problems.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Yasmin. That's very inspiring. And Annie, a final word for you as
Very,
we
very
started.
good. Thank you. I get to say the last word. I think the idea of identity actually came from the global shapers. So the fact that we have 75 startups showcasing on this platform today is great. So how do we get there? I think the identity can only be built if you know purpose and passion. I think Min talked about magic. The reason why he has the magic is he has a passion. We need to be here now on a good common purpose. And we cannot do this alone, so we need partnerships. And that's why we are on this stage, because we believe that the public-private partnership can make this happen. And the last one is, not because Google is here, platforms. ASEAN is a platform, so come on this platform, come together with the governments, with the companies, and all of us can make a better, bigger, a safer ASEAN together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a wonderful. So a final word from me, and I want to thank all of you very much for being here, especially the students as well as the public, because the whole aim of this exercise was to open up the forum to new ideas, to share with you the new insights that these experts have. And you know, it's been a lot of talking. We've all been sitting here and talking, and maybe some of the stuff was a bit academic. But I hope for the students particularly, that there were some ideas which you took away from this discussion. Things about passion, things about dreaming, things about magic. These are all wonderful words. I hope in some way they have inspired you to a better future. Because, you know, I heard the two things I want to share with you. One of them is dream, but dream with your eyes open. And the other thing that I heard is that when opportunity knocks at your door, open it. So I hope that we've opened some doors for you today in terms of ideas, in terms of inspiration. We have a very inspirational panel here. So I want to thank the Minister very much for being here. Thank you very much, Minister. And I want to thank all of you in the audience, and especially I want to thank my wonderful panelists. Thank you very much. A big hand to all of you and to the panel. Thank you.
Yes, maybe we should take a photo from the side.
And all of you, I hope you've got your copy of this. I have one copy here, and Min had said I should give it to the person who asked.
Baik, demikian tadi sebahagian daripada sesi pertama Forum Ekonomi Sedunia untuk ASEAN WEF 2018 di Hanoi, Vietnam. Sesi itu antara lain disertai Menteri Belia dan Sukan Syed Saddiq dan Ketua Pegawai MDEC Datuk Yasmin Mahmud. Sesi penuh forum terbuka ini akan disiarkan di platform Astro AWANI.